Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's check it out.
Molly's your one, right? Or you don't know?
That's the confusing thing. I mean, no, Lauren was my one.
Lauren was.
Yeah, but like me and Molly just get along so well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's the way it kind of looked, but that's different from what we heard last time. So by this point, which is later in the 10 days, it looks like Dave has Lauren as number one and Molly is not number one. But wait, so when we last left off, that whole scene between Lauren and Molly walking back to the lounge going, it's a done deal. We're almost engaged. Definitely I'm the number one. And Lauren was going into her date with Dave saying, what's happening here? And the way it looked was that Lauren was definitely number two, but Dave couldn't say that. So at what point was Molly demoted? Because there's that date where he talks about getting a ring, and it's interesting the parallels between Dave and Leo, right?
Telling Joey about it too. Like oh man, I hate that I'm saying it as like if I pick one versus the other.
Yeah,
you know?
I was
It's
going
like,
through the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm starting to feel like, oh man, I'm gonna get. The main thing for me is like running from my own feelings. It's like I feel like it actually might work. And then that actually caused a lot of other issues for me.
I'm encouraged that his demeanor at least exhibits some form of worry or suffering or something. I don't know where that's coming from, though. I want to actually rewind this and really look at what he's saying. I would have thought that, and maybe this is the case, that what he's suffering from right now is he has to break up with someone. He's going to have to hurt someone's feelings. That's just inevitable, right? Or both, or himself or something. You know, someone's going to get hurt, and that would be painful, pre-painful, if you will, and the guilt of that. And you could imagine, given his history with his mom, and there's just a lot of speculation. He's talked a bit about his relationship with his mom, but it's so surface information. It's just hard to know. And anyone would hopefully worry about hurting someone's feelings. But, you know, maybe there's something in there about his mom and the loss. Let's rewind this because I didn't hear anything that directly indicated that that was what he was worried about.
Yeah, but like me and Molly just get along so well.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it gets confusing for me. And I was telling Joey about it too. Like oh man, I hate that I'm.
All right, so the beginning of his paragraph here is, I get along with Molly so well, but I don't know how he would describe his relationship with Lauren. Guessing he would say that it feels more intense, more like mutual need, or at least Lauren needs him and is fighting for it. Molly is more relaxed, and he's identified that. That's how he's starting this paragraph, which isn't in line with what I was saying earlier.
I'm saying it as like if I pick one versus the other.
Yeah,
you know?
I was
It's
going
like,
through the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's fine if he's having this suffering as well, but you know, the words he's using is in the category of suffering because I guess it's like FOMO. He's not expressing a worry of hurting someone, and maybe he also feels that, but he is expressing in this moment fear of having to deprive himself, I guess. I mean, that's a really harsh way of putting it, but and phrased in a different way, anyone would feel that, right? It's like, well, what if the other person is the one? It seems like it could be, and they're so different, and I could see it working with either one. What do I do? You know, I think that's okay. So there's good and bad ways of phrasing it.
Yeah, and I'm starting to feel like, oh man, I'm gonna get. The main thing for me is like running from my own feelings. It's like I feel like it actually might work, and then that actually caused a lot of other.
Okay, so I didn't catch this the first time, but I wonder if what he's saying there is, if I have a tendency to run from my feelings, which would mean I would run from Lauren because Lauren evokes emotion from me, and I would run to Molly. And I know that in the past I would do that. My dogs are barking. I don't know at what. I'm not sure what they're barking at. But if I do that, that would just be falling into an old pattern. It would feel comfortable for me, but it would actually be not the right decision for me. But it's hard to go toward the emotions. But also, it's hard to know if going towards the emotions would actually be toward your soulmate. I mean, how would you know in a situation like this, right? So I think that's what he's thinking.
There are issues for me outside of just here, like with my sister and stuff.
Okay, so he cries. I want to rewind that and watch it without interrupting it because I think it will say something. I'm really curious as to what's going on with him internally.
Like, oh man, I'm gonna get. The main thing for me is like running from my own feelings. It's like I feel like it actually might work. And then that actually caused a lot of other issues for me outside of just here, like with my sister and stuff.
So it actually might work. And that might, wow, wait, what is he saying? So, okay. One of the heuristics that I use when people cry, when I'm trying to understand the inner workings of someone, the dynamics of the psyche, the psychodynamics, if you will, is, and it sounds a bit harsh or judgmental, but it's not, that when people cry, a lot of the times they're crying for themselves, which would be okay. Last night I went to a play with Stacy. It was a fictional conversation between, or a dramatized conversation between Tolkien and C.S. Lewis just before C.S. Lewis dies. And I am a huge nerd for Tolkien, and especially, and you know, I know of Narnia and C.S. Lewis and stuff, but also the history involved, the time and the place, their own childhoods, how they were friends, and there were other people involved, and how they riffed on each other, you know, kind of like Paul and John and the Beatles. It was like that. And so pretty much the entire time of the play, I was crying for various different reasons. It was a bit of a tearjerker anyway because of the dramatized relationship of suffering and pain. And I had forgotten that C.S. Lewis actually had written a fairly seminal work on grief because his wife had died, and he talked about how society tends to frame loss as the initial phase, but what he was going into was the long-term reality of it and how dark it is and how empty it is and how visceral it is, like 6 months, 12 months later, and was a part of a larger trend over the last, couple hundred years of people recognizing that. And I'm writing a book on grief right now, so it was intriguing. But anyway, so if I use my own way of looking at crying in that way, I was crying for myself. What is that? Well, it's impossible to know, but some of the moments that I was crying were moments in which they were expressing regret for having not apologized to each other or having hurt each other's feelings, right? So I, in this angle, would have been crying because I've been hurt and people haven't apologized to me, and I've felt guilty or bad about hurting someone and not apologizing fully, not reaching out, but having the feeling of guilt or shame or regret and wanting to, but just not being vulnerable, not putting in the effort, not valuing it enough, or just distracting myself and avoiding and moving on with something else, maybe even within the relationship, right? So I would see it that way, that I was crying for myself. And the reason why I see it this way is because one way of looking at crying in humans and Homo sapiens is that we evolved to cry, because it's one of the first things that we do when we enter this world, as a way of provoking our caregivers to pay attention to us and help. If we're crying because we're hungry or we're uncomfortable or we're crabby or we have a pain, like a zipper is poking us, or there's something that's scaring us, or we have an earache, these are all reasons to cry. It's one of the only ways we can communicate for the first number of months of our lives. And in all those instances, we're experiencing some sort of suffering, and so we cry, and it alerts people, they come to us and they help us, hopefully. So it makes sense that if we're crying in our older age, that it's a similar motivation. it's more complicated and more nuanced, right? Consciously, I would say that I was crying for Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and I felt bad for them, and so I was crying for them. But to me, that doesn't fit with my model of emotion in general, but also with crying. I'm identifying with them, and it's provoking something in me because I can feel compassion without viscerally having a physical reaction of water shooting out of my eyes, right? That's different. I can think something's funny, whereas if something causes me to just guffaw, then it's tapping into something different, right? So when he's crying, and I have no way of proving that this is an accurate way of conceptualizing, but if we look at his crying, not to say that he's selfish, but to say that for all humans when they cry, if we use that as a way of trying to get at what caused the visceral cry, getting choked up. Let's rewatch that.
Going through the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm starting to feel like, oh man, I'm gonna get. The main thing for me is like running from my own feelings. It's like I feel like it actually might work, and then that actually caused a lot of other issues for me outside of just here, like with my sister and stuff.
All right, so maybe he'll go into more detail. I hope that he does, because I'm curious. But he is, in this moment, having this visceral reaction. So what could that be? How does he feel sorry for himself in this moment? Not in a narcissistic way. Well, in a general human narcissist, and in that we're all narcissistically oriented. We're all self-interested, right? That's another way of using narcissism in that general, non-pathological, all humans are like this sort of way. But we all have, hopefully, some self-interest. And so he is, I think, saying, I don't know, I'll just add this as an hypothesis, that he is on the verge of actually falling in love with Lauren. And we heard him say, though, that his sister said, this is ridiculous. Those women are too good for you. That's his story. That's him recalling. But, the more you hear, especially in line with this, you think, because I was wondering if he was misinterpreting his sister or whatever, but it's possible there's some ticks in the column here that sister is a problem. Because what sister, loving sister, would have a problem with their younger brother falling in love? Even if you thought, well, it's reality TV. I mean, come on. But it's like, he's a grown man. And at the very least, it's like, well, maybe it'll end in divorce, but it's his life and he's happy now. I mean, I imagine a lot of people, family members are like that don't understand that the show actually does legitimately result in legitimate marriages. So it sounds like he's saying, normally I run from my feelings, but I don't want to do that here. And if I don't run from my feelings, then I start thinking, oh my God, and I get engaged and maybe get married. Then there's other issues. My sister, outside of just here, with my sister and stuff, where the worries of judgment, attack, or rejection, this whole integrity, it's like, I'm just so curious as to what the family situation was like with him, his sister, and his mom, right? There's been so many, he has directly said, my mom was hard on me, and my sister says those women are too good for you, at the same time of he's starting to cry as he's thinking of getting engaged to someone that he might be falling for because of, oof. I don't think we've seen this before, right? It's probably happened, but not that someone would disclose it. And if I go with that, which I can't know, then a lot of real facing of maybe a lifetime of harm or something that's going on between him and his sister or between him and his family or something of, wait, so I'm about to just be me and I'm opening up and I'm doing this for me. And then immediately I get this realization of terror of they're going to attack me and they're going to reject me. Oh no, but wait, what's going on here? Is this my life? I've always kind of knew this, but now I'm faced it in reality, and this is how I've been treated my whole life. It kind of has that vibe.
So,
I think
I will say, Joey giving golden retriever energy Let's rewatch it.
It's like I feel like it actually might work. And then that actually caused a lot of other issues for me outside of just here, like with my sister and stuff.
Oh my God. What's I mean, God bless, but it fits the brand, Joey.
So
I think, obviously, like, it's your sister, but I think you got to think about what's best for you in the end.
I know.
You know?
I know.
And when it comes down to it, whoever's going to make you happy and you can see yourself with, that's what you got to do.
So Devin is consoling and advising or helping and saying, essentially, hey, if your sister disapproves, like, I mean, he's not saying it like the way I'm about to say it, but it's like, hey, if you're connecting with someone, it shouldn't matter what your sister thinks about it. So that seems to indicate that Devin has heard a lot more of the story and understands the bigger picture, which I'm really curious what that is. But just think about that. It's possible Dave is distorted, and if the sister were here, she would say, well, I don't know what I've never been judgmental. That's not likely, right? So what's going on here? And when you just extrapolate from this, like, this could be extremely problematic, right? When someone's falling in love or just contemplating it, and the first thing that comes to mind is, but oh my God, my sister, oh no, oh no, oh no. What? We've seen that before. Plenty of people on the show have been like, well, my dad, you're going to have to win him over because we ain't moving forward unless he approves. That's just the way I am or my culture is or whatever. We've seen that before on 90 Day Fiancé. That happens, right? But this has a different feel to it. And plus, it's your sister. There's some major red flags of some highly coercive, controlling, domineering, harmful, critical family dynamics here.
If it's right, your sister is gonna support it.
Yeah, no, I know.
You got it, bro.
Or she's a little domineering or a little overbearing, a little overprotective. And it's not severe, it's not horrible. And she can be a little distant at times, and given his loss of his mom, he desperately does not want to be rejected, even in part by his sister. And so the idea that his sister would kind of disapprove is really cutting to the core of him, because he has such a fragile hold on attachment of this mother figure in his life. So it could be that, which I guess I'm hoping it's more something like that.
Like, that's fascinating. Fascinating. And I'm like, so you're gonna end things with me? Who should be confused here? I did not see myself in this position.
I know.
For a lot of reasons. But mainly just because I'm like, I don't think I'm fucking dumb. But I might be.
It's been weird.
Yeah, it would be really weird because, of course, we're seeing him have conversations with both. We're seeing an edited version, but we're seeing him have a conversation with both. And the way that they are deciding, the way that Lauren's deciding to do it, which is totally fine, is to not have open conversations about who she's connecting with. And so Lauren and Molly don't have a chance to confer about what's being said. Have we seen that directly in a situation like this? I know that we have, right? Was it Matthew with AD and someone else? I can't remember. But Amber, was it? Anyway, the inability to confer and the overwhelming nature of the pod situation, it would be really confusing. You don't have people to talk to. You don't have a lot of time to think about it. And you could imagine someone just being in a whirlwind of emotion, because just 7 days earlier, they didn't know any of these people, and then, or 5 days, or wherever they are in the timeline. And now all of a sudden, it's just like your best friends with your side of the pods, in the lounge, and you've met the soulmate of your life and you've been looking for this person for the past 15 years. It's just overwhelming and there's no distractions. And you would be pretty confused and think, okay, I feel like I am picking up on the truth that I'm definitely Dave's number one. So what's going on here? And she even, I don't know if I included it, but she's like, I don't feel like I'm dumb, but I also don't feel like Molly's dumb. So if Molly feels like she's number one, then what's happening? Is Molly just a little dumber than me? Or is Dave giving us a line? Or is she just wishful? Or am I wishful? What's going on here? I don't know. And if I were a little birdie on Lauren's shoulder, and I think other people will tell people in the lounges this kind of thing, that I would say, well, it doesn't, I wouldn't go there in your head. I would just focus on your relationship with Dave and continue to date him and accept that until he says one way or the other, then you just don't know. And assume that your heart is telling you the right thing. But also, maybe I would say to Lauren, don't think about it as who's number one until Dave commits. Just concentrate on whatever you have with Dave, because it's just not fruitful thought. Because if you, for example, did investigate and figure out that Molly was a little dumb or you're a little delulu, as the kids will say, or whatever, that doesn't change anything because you're still interested in him. And if he proposes to you, you can say no to that. But until he proposes to you, then it doesn't really matter any of this stuff, right? He could change his mind tomorrow. Who knows what's going on, right? Also, if you get in your head about this, it could really taint if things do work out with you and Dave, it could really taint things because you couldn't work yourself into a frenzy about information you don't know, and it could make you distrust him when there isn't grounds for that. So just continue to date him. And I think a lot of people on the show will do that, and I think that's wise. So I think it might indicate something about Lauren that she's getting hooked in this way. Insecurity or histories with competition or sibling rivalry for parental attunement. I'll say this again, I've said this before, there's nothing wrong with what Lauren is thinking and her impulses. It's totally human. I would imagine everyone would have that impulse. It's just like, what do you do with it exactly? And we're seeing her have these whispering conversations with people, and we've seen that before. So she's not making a big drama about it. And there's also a chance, because there's a tendency of the audience, in my observation, that when someone like Lauren does something like this, especially compared to Molly, because Molly's just not engaging in that kind of whispering conversation, or at least in the edit, that the Laurens of the show will be labeled as conniving and of sabotaging or being Machiavellian or acting like a middle schooler or something. And certainly that could and has happened. I mean, just think about Micah and Irina going up to, was her name Amber? Is that a different Amber? When she got broken up with by Paul and she's crying in the corner, and Micah and Irina are like sneaking up and giggling and spying, and it's just, my God. So it happens. But this is a far cry from that. So I would also worry that if she continues to do this, that she'll be labeled a villain unfairly. But I don't know where things go. What do you think? All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself. Truly, because you deserve it. You really, really do.